Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's get into the story. In the dense wilderness of the southern Appalachians, there's a stretch of land that hunters avoid, hikers ignore, and locals discuss only in half sentences. It is a region unmarked on tourist maps, its trails deliberately absent from park brochures. For decades, it has carried a whispered name, the place where strangers disappear. Officials record the vanishings as accidents, falls, exposure, animal encounters, but within nearby towns the explanation is older, darker, and less forgiving. They say a tribe still moves in those woods, a tribe never counted by census takers, a tribe that hunts outsiders who cross invisible boundaries. The first documented disappearance connected to the area dates back to 1967. A man named Gerald Cooper, a trucker from Ohio, left his rig at a rest stop and wandered into the trees to stretch his legs. He never returned. His rig was found idling, headlights on, wallet still in the cab. Searchers located no tracks, no torn fabric, no blood. The only anomaly was a crude bundle of sticks left beside the rest stop fence, lashed together with vine in the shape of a snare. The case faded into obscurity, but the pattern had begun. Over the following decades, hikers vanished along unmarked trails. Campers were reported missing from established sites, and in one case, a pair of college students on a photography trip were found wandering barefoot and incoherent 15 miles from their last known location. Their tent and equipment remained untouched. When asked what had happened, one of them could only mutter the same phrase again and again: "They were counting us." The other refused to speak at all. These cases rarely made national headlines. They were buried in local papers, reduced to small columns beneath weather reports. But among deputies and search and rescue teams, the reputation grew. Men and women who had worked the grid lines admitted, privately, that they had felt eyes tracking them from the trees. Some claimed they heard wood striking wood in repetitive cadence. 3 beats, pause, 3 more. A rhythm too deliberate for random chance. In 1998, a park ranger named Alice Montgomery began compiling her own logbook of incidents. She kept copies of official reports, personal notes from interviews, and maps marked with red dots where disappearances had occurred. When she left the service 10 years later, she handed the log to a journalist friend, saying, "If you follow the dots, you'll see a hunting ground, and every ground has its keeper." That logbook, never published in full, circulates quietly among researchers of the unexplained. Its margins are filled with sketches of symbols, vertical lines carved into bark, spirals etched into stone, animal bones arranged in lattices. Each sketch carries the same caption, boundary mark. Elaborate theories surfaced over the years. Some claimed the lost tribe were descendants of Civil War deserters who chose the mountains over surrender, building a hidden society from scraps of survival. Others argued they were remnants of much older communities, people who refused assimilation and chose the shadows instead of the census. Whatever the origin, the behavior described was consistent. Strangers are observed, stalked, and eventually hunted. The tribe does not approach openly. They allow their prey to feel watched until fear drives mistakes. Only then do they close in. The strongest testimony comes from those who escaped, though survivors are rare. In 2003, a hunter named Daniel Boyd staggered into a ranger station barefoot, his clothes shredded, his rifle missing. He claimed he had been tracked for 3 nights by figures who never showed themselves fully, only shadows flitting between trees. He said they knocked wood together in steady rhythm, closing the distance each night until he abandoned his gear and ran without stopping. He bore scratches consistent with brambles and burns across his arms, as if brushed repeatedly by firebrands. His story was filed, dismissed, and eventually forgotten. But when Boyd was asked why he believed he had been spared, his reply was chilling. "They don't keep everyone. They only take the ones they need." To this day, the hills remain quiet, unadvertised, avoided by those who know the history. But the disappearances have not stopped. Between 2015 and 2020, 4 more hikers were reported missing within the same radius marked decades earlier by Montgomery's log. In each case, their vehicles were recovered. Their supplies remained untouched. Search efforts yielded nothing, and in each case, faint carvings were discovered nearby. Parallel lines cut into bark, often in groups of 3. The question that lingers is whether these stories reflect folklore born of tragedy or evidence of a people who endure beyond law and record. The land itself offers no answer. The trees stand silent, the trails overgrow, the stones bear their marks. What remains are the voices of those who whisper that the tribe still moves, still waits, still hunts, and if you stray too far into their territory, you may be counted among the missing, another stranger who never comes home. If the stories ended with missing hikers and fading campfires, perhaps the legend of the lost tribe would have stayed a local ghost tale. But what unsettles investigators most are the consistencies across time and testimony. Different witnesses, decades apart, describe the same signs, the same sounds, the same dreadful feeling that they were prey in a hunt they never agreed to join. One account stands out above the rest. In 2011, a group of 4 graduate students from North Carolina State University entered the backcountry to conduct a biodiversity survey. Their notes, later recovered from a waterproof notebook, documented the ordinary: species of ferns, bird calls, soil conditions. But toward the 3rd day, the tone shifted. One entry read simply, "Heard wood knocking again tonight. Not random. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. Not a bird, not an echo. Felt like a warning." The last written words in the notebook were more disturbing. "We're being followed. Markings on the trees look new." When rescuers were finally dispatched, nearly a week later, all 4 tents were discovered intact. Packs, notebooks, and food rations were left undisturbed. But the students were gone. The only sign of struggle was a ring of footprints pressed into the soil around the tents. Barefoot, wide-soled, and overlapping in spirals, officials wrote it off as disorientation and possible drowning in nearby creeks. Locals had another explanation. "The tribe doesn't need gear," one old hunter told a deputy. "They only take what walks." Forensic specialists later studied plaster casts of the prints. Their findings never reached the public record, but a leaked memo described the impressions as human in origin, yet lacking footwear consistent with modern populations. The skin ridges in the casts suggested feet hardened by decades without shoes. One line of the memo, underlined twice, read, "Calloused like leather, arch collapsed, toes spread for grip." These are not recreational prints. Parallel to these disappearances, residents living near the boundaries of the search zones reported strange encounters. A farmer in Giles County claimed to see figures on his property at twilight, standing motionless at the tree line. He called out, received no answer, and fired a warning shot. The figures vanished into the undergrowth without a sound. Days later, he found animal bones arranged in a spiral on his porch. He moved within the month. Another testimony came from a woman driving along a rural road after midnight. She saw a figure run across her headlights, tall, thin, and covered in mud. She braked, convinced it was a lost hiker, but when she rolled down her window to call out, she heard knocking echo through the woods, steady and deliberate. Terrified, she sped away. The next morning, deputies found her car abandoned on the roadside. She had walked the last 3 miles home on foot. By now, the pattern had grown undeniable. Strangers who strayed too far into the hills were observed, herded, and, if unlucky, vanished. Those who survived did so not because they outsmarted their hunters, but because the hunters allowed it. As one survivor later told a reporter, "You don't escape them. You're chosen to leave so you can tell the story." That's how they keep the rest of the world afraid. Archaeologists have occasionally weighed in, though cautiously. Some speculate that the tribe could descend from early settlers who fractured away from colonial life, or even from indigenous groups who refused contact centuries ago. Others argue the evidence suggests a hybrid community, people who abandoned society at different times, merging into a hidden lineage. But the anthropological debate never overshadows the fear. Too many locals know the signs, the symbols carved in trees, the strange bone totems, the rhythmic knocks that echo through the hollows. Every account reinforces the same chilling truth. The tribe is not a myth used to scare children. It is a system of survival that endures, untouched by law or calendar. And when strangers stumble into their land, they are not simply lost. They are entered into a hunt where the outcome is rarely in their favor, and still, the disappearances continue. By the time federal authorities quietly acknowledged a pattern in the Appalachian disappearances, the lost tribe had already become part of local identity. Towns on the edge of the search grid learned to live with their reputation. Restaurants sold missing hiker burgers as novelty items. Souvenir shops stocked t-shirts printed with slogans like "Don't Get Counted." But beneath the humor lay a quiet agreement. There were places you did not go after sundown, trails you did not enter alone, and sounds in the night you did not answer. One of the most detailed modern encounters came from a pair of brothers, Daniel and Carl Reeves, who vanished during a hunting trip in 2017. Only Daniel returned. His testimony, recorded by deputies, reads like the outline of a nightmare, but every word was given under oath. The brothers had set out for deer along an old logging road, carrying rifles and enough supplies for a weekend. The first day passed without incident, though Daniel later admitted they felt watched. It was not a sound so much as a pressure, a sense of being weighed against some invisible scale. On the second evening, as they cleaned game near their campfire, Carl heard the first knocks. 3 beats, a pause, 3 more. They froze, waiting for it to repeat. When it did, Daniel thought it was a prank by other hunters. But when he called out, no answer came, only silence so complete it rang in his ears. Minutes later, they found a structure 20 yards beyond their camp. A tripod of lashed branches, bones dangling like charms, vertebrae strung together with strips of hide. Carl wanted to take it down, convinced it was intimidation. Daniel stopped him. He remembered the warnings. Never touch what isn't yours. They moved their camp instead. That night, Daniel woke to footsteps circling the tent. Bare feet, he said. Slow, deliberate, never breaking twigs. He whispered to Carl, who unzipped the flap and aimed his flashlight. For a fraction of a second, the beam caught movement. A tall, thin figure with skin smeared in ash and hair bound into ropes. The figure did not flee. It simply tilted its head, as though studying the brothers, then melted back into the trees. Carl wanted to fire his rifle. Daniel begged him not to. They stayed awake until dawn, listening to wood knock against wood in that relentless rhythm. By morning, their camp had been disturbed. Not destroyed, disturbed. Their packs were unzipped, food left untouched, ammunition boxes opened and closed. But their boots were gone. Both pairs, taken in the night. Carl swore he would hike out barefoot if necessary. Daniel insisted they conserve energy and move slowly, hoping to find their bearings. Instead, they found themselves funneled. Paths that should have led downslope bent back uphill. Clearings they swore they had crossed once already appeared again with slight differences. Stones rearranged, symbols freshly carved. It was as if the forest itself had been restitched while they slept. At midday, they stumbled onto a clearing unlike any Daniel had ever seen. The grass was flattened into concentric circles, as though trampled by dozens of feet moving in unison. At the center lay a pit lined with stones, its ashes still warm. Around it, crude stakes jutted from the soil, each crowned with bone. Human bone. Daniel recognized the curve of a jaw, the socket of an eye. He tried to pull Carl away, but his brother stood staring, frozen. "They've been here a long time," Carl whispered. "Long enough to build a language out of bones." That was the last time Daniel saw his brother. Minutes later, while skirting the clearing, they heard the knocks again, closer than ever. Panic overtook them. They ran. Branches whipped their faces, rocks tore at their feet. Daniel swore he felt shapes moving parallel just beyond sight, herding them into narrower and narrower passages. Carl fell behind. Daniel turned once to see his brother dragged sideways into the brush, his scream cut short. Daniel tried to follow, but something struck him across the back, blunt, not sharp, knocking the breath out of him. When he came to, it was night, the forest glowing faint with distant firelight. Daniel described lying still, feigning unconsciousness while figures moved around him. They did not speak. They clicked their tongues, a sound he would later compare to the chatter of insects. One bent close enough that he felt hot breath against his cheek. The figure sniffed him, then stepped away. Hours passed before he dared move. When he finally crawled forward, he realized they had left him intentionally. Boots gone, rifle gone, brother gone, but alive. He staggered until he reached a power line corridor, then followed the wires downhill until he collapsed near a farm. Deputies logged his story, but no official search for Carl ever followed. The area was labeled too dangerous, conditions too unstable. Locals knew the truth. The tribe had taken what it wanted, and no amount of manpower would bring him back. Daniel's testimony echoed older cases. Survivors always spoke of being herded, studied, then spared, as if chosen. And always there was the rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, beating through the trees like a pulse too old to die. Anthropologists who reviewed the account noted parallels with hunting practices among ancient cultures. Exhausting prey through fear, corralling rather than chasing, controlling terrain until escape routes vanished. What unsettled them most was the suggestion of selection. Why some victims were taken and others released remained unexplained. Other pieces of evidence supported the existence of a system. In 2019, a pair of hikers found a bone whistle lodged in the fork of a tree, carved with 6 vertical lines separated by a gap. When blown, the whistle produced 3 sharp tones, a pause, then 3 more. Rangers confiscated it within hours. The hikers, however, uploaded their recording online before surrendering it. The clip circulated widely, its shrill cadence haunting in its simplicity. Skeptics claimed it was staged. Believers heard it as confirmation of everything whispered for generations. That same year, a drone operator surveying storm damage accidentally captured footage of a figure moving between trees at impossible speed. The frame shows a humanoid form, tall and wiry, covered head to toe in mud or ash. Its face is blurred, but the proportions are unmistakable. Within hours, the footage was removed from the operator's account, replaced by a notice citing sensitive content. Those who downloaded the file before deletion insist the figure was real. By now, the lost tribe is less myth than shadowed certainty. The hills keep swallowing strangers, the woods keep speaking in knocks, and the silence around official records grows heavier. Every few years, a survivor emerges, shaken, barefoot, often incoherent, while families wait for loved ones who never return. The question is no longer whether the tribe exists, but how long they can remain unseen in a world mapped by satellites and surveyed by drones. Yet, perhaps invisibility is not their shield at all. Perhaps it is the complicity of those who know but cannot afford to speak. Rangers, deputies, even federal agents. They all file their reports in careful language, never daring to write the word tribe. Instead, they speak of hazardous terrain, wildlife activity, unresolved disappearances. Meanwhile, the hills remain, and the rhythm continues. For those who live nearby, the rules are simple. Never stray from marked paths, never travel alone, and if you hear 3 knocks followed by 3 more, do not answer. Pretend it is the wind, the trees, the woodpeckers. Pretend you believe that, even as your heart begins to pound in time with the rhythm. Because once the tribe has counted you, you are already inside the hunt. And inside their hunt, very few ever walk back out. The strangest element of the legend is not the disappearances themselves, but the silence that follows them. Families file missing persons reports, vigils are held, search parties comb the ridges for weeks. Then, inevitably, the cases fade from headlines. Local papers stop printing updates. Search efforts are scaled down. Officials cite weather, terrain, and wildlife as explanations, and the story slips quietly into the category of unsolved. Yet in every town bordering those woods, the locals know better. They whisper that the tribe has claimed another, and the land has swallowed its proof. In 2021, an investigative journalist named Laura Kent tried to break that silence. She traveled to the region armed with cameras, recorders, and Montgomery's old logbook. Her podcast, Into the Hollows, ran for 6 episodes before abruptly ending. In the first 5, Laura interviewed families of the missing, rangers who had retired early, and anthropologists who spoke cautiously about uncontacted peoples. She outlined patterns, clusters of vanishings every 5 to 7 years, symbols carved into bark, and reports of wood knocking that matched across decades. The 6th episode was different. It was raw audio from her final field trip. Laura and her producer camped along the ridge where the Reeves brothers had disappeared. At midnight, listeners heard the first knocks. 3 beats, a pause, 3 more. Her voice dropped to a whisper, admitting she finally understood the fear her interviewees described. The audio captured heavy breathing, footsteps circling the camp, and what sounded like a bone whistle shrieking in the distance. Laura ended with a single line. "If you find this, know that they are real." The podcast feed went dark the following week. Her car was located at a trailhead, engine cold, keys still inside. Neither Laura nor her producer were ever found. That recording reignited debate. Skeptics claimed the sounds were staged. Believers pointed to the consistency of the knocks, the unmistakable cadence, and the fact that the tribe seemed to allow the recording to survive. As one folklorist put it, they don't mind being known. They mind being found. Meanwhile, disappearances continued. A pair of tourists from Michigan vanished on a day hike. A veteran outdoorsman left behind his gear but never returned. Each case added to the weight of the legend, while officials doubled down on natural explanations. Yet, search and rescue volunteers leaked photographs showing bones arranged in patterns, shelters built from bent saplings, and prints that could not be mistaken for boots. The evidence was quietly archived, never shared with the public. For the people who live near those ridges, the legend has become a set of rules. Never whistle after dark. Never respond to knocks no matter how close they sound. Never pick up bones you find hanging in trees. These are not superstitions. They are survival strategies. An old farmer explained it best. You don't fight them. You don't chase them. You just pray they're not counting you that night. The deeper question remains. Why do they hunt strangers? Some argue it is ritual, a way of reinforcing boundaries passed down for centuries. Others believe it is survival, a tribe maintaining itself in the most primal way. The most disturbing theory comes from those who study their patterns, that the tribe hunts not for sustenance, but for sport, selecting victims deliberately and releasing survivors to spread the fear further. Fear, after all, is a weapon. It keeps outsiders away, protecting the tribe's secrecy. Whatever their motive, the result is the same. Strangers who wander too far vanish. Survivors carry scars that never fade. Families mourn without closure. And the lost tribe remains in the shadows, never fully seen, never caught, but always present. The Appalachians are old mountains, worn down to their bones, but they keep secrets sharper than any peak. Beneath their canopy, a people endure who refuse the outside world, who claim the right to hunt within their boundaries. Officials will never confirm it. Reports will always cite weather or wildlife. But the knocks will continue, echoing through the hollows long after the headlines die. And if you find yourself hiking those ridges and hear it, 3 beats, pause, 3 more, you will know the legend is not a story. It is a warning. At that moment, you are no longer a visitor. You are prey. And whether you survive depends not on your strength or your courage, but on whether the tribe decides to let you go. Because in the hunting grounds of the lost tribe, escape is never earned. It is granted. And it is granted only so the story can keep moving, whispered by survivors, told in gas stations and sheriff's offices, repeated in videos like this one. The tribe does not need to be seen to be real. They only need to be feared, and feared they are. Still waiting, still counting, still hunting strangers.